And good morning, everyone. This is the Rooftop Sports, and welcome to Morning Mariners Talk with the Steve Silver swinging for the fences. And boy, I'm just recovering from that Mariners loss yesterday. It was a pretty embarrassing loss. And other than that, Mr. Silver, how you doing?
Oh man, I'm excellent, man. I am. I can't complain.
That's good because
although what sucks is that again we have to deal with bullpen shenanigans, which coincidentally led to a 3-game losing streak after essentially having a very good series win against the Phillies, in which this team looked like the most complete we've seen in a month. Granted, we get Zach Wheeler in game 3 and he pitches an absolute dandy. But still, taking 2 out of 3 from the Phillies, and then all of a sudden you have your ears pinned back because you have the Detroit Tigers in town, and then all of a sudden the Detroit Tigers, start looking like world beaters. Although we did get some very good starting pitching performances in the first 2 games against the Tigers, it was a bullpen fiasco. And Scott Services need to use Jonathan Hernandez on back-to-back days, and especially in the top of the 9th last night. Tigers are clinging into a 1-run lead, and of course you want to put yourself in the best position to get to the bottom of the 9th inning to put yourself in a position to win the game, and unfortunately that didn't happen. So yeah, there's a lot of frustration. I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm equally as frustrated, because these are the type of series, if you want to win the division, these are the type of series you can't just give away to a team that's going absolutely nowhere in the Detroit Tigers. And take it from somebody who lives in Michigan, who watches a lot of Detroit Tiger baseball. They're not a very good team at all. And so, coming into the series, they weren't playing great either. And you give 2 out of 3 to a team like that. It makes you start to question whether or not Scott Service's priorities are in line, because when you start saying stuff like we're waiting to use these certain players for the playoffs, and it's like, what are you talking about, man? As a matter of fact, that's insane, because you actually have to get there first. Scott Service is acting like they have a 10-game lead in the division. They can just be on cruise control to the playoffs, when in fact, they don't. So
they just lost the division lead again. Yeah. And before we even get more in detail about the game, here's a message from our sponsor, SeatGeek. And good morning, Flick of the Switch. And I know you're going to be disappointed.
SeatGeek is a mobile ticketing app for sporting events, concerts, and other events. They make the buying experience easier by the app ranking each ticket from 0 to 10 to see if you are getting a good deal. And you can see exactly where you are sitting. I regularly use that app, and I have had nothing but a fantastic experience with SeatGeek. Use my promo code RoofTopSports to get $20 off of your first purchase. Link to the code, app, and website will be in the description, so take advantage, and thank you.
And go ahead and use that promo code RoofTopSports if you are going to the Mariners game for your $20 off. If you want to watch the Mariners get swept by one of the worst teams in baseball, or if you're waiting for that Mets series where the Mariners may get their asses kicked. So we'll go ahead and do that. If you want to save $20 and get you some food so you ain't cranky throughout the entire game.
I'll just say this. Number 1, get off your fucking wallet and go to SeatGeek. Use the promo code RoofTopSports and get $20 off. But if you don't want to go watch the Mariners get swept, and I don't blame you, it's just much easier to watch it for free from your couch on Root Sports or whatever streaming service you use to stream the Mariners. But also, you can use it for the Everett Aqua Sox up north in Everett, who, by the way, just has newly promoted Colt Emerson, along with Laz Montez and Michael Arroyo. That team is loaded, unlike the current Mariners situation in Seattle, which we're going to get into that. But use the promo code RoofTopSports. Get off your goddamn wallet. Go watch the Aqua Sox or the Rainiers, whichever minor league team you prefer. But do it. Don't even think about it. Just do it.
Just do it. And let's get into that game, shall we? As if Flick of the Switch is like pretty much saying get into the game. So the Mariners lost.
hold on. He's got a point though, right? Because I mean, we're only 3 minutes in and you're already running commercials. You know what I mean? He's got a point here. I'm just saying.
He's got a point.
He's
got a point. But hey, it's not like a couple minutes worth of commercials like TVs do. There are times where there's shows that do the intro and then whoop, commercial.
Or, you know, or like it's that YouTube show with Ty Dane where it seems like every 30 seconds they're running a commercial for whatever the hell. So it's hard to watch. Anyway, let's get into the game.
Let's get into the game. Yeah. After a word from our spot. Just kidding. So Mariners dropped it again, 4-2 against the Tigers. And here is what happened. Here was the scoring summary. First, it started with
6-2.
Yeah, it was 6-2. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong game. What am I doing?
There you go.
I mean, that's what happens when I didn't get enough sleep. That game must have really messed me up so much that I got really bad sleep. When I first saw 4-2, I was like, wait, what? So first, it started with a Perez leadoff home run after George Kirby was kind of getting taxed on. Then Madras in the third inning, he doubled to right, and that's where Mitch Haniger bobbled the ball, which really arguably caused the 2-0 lead. Maybe Veerling would have scored anyway on that error without the error by Mitch Haniger because he's not exactly quick with the ball. Then the fourth inning, Rogers hit this blasting of a home run, and when I saw it, I was like, yep, that is gone. Arozarena didn't even move.
Yep.
It was like, dang. Then hope was actually restored when Cal Raleigh hit a 2-run home run off of the right side.
Yep.
Off of their starting pitcher who pitched pretty well, Scooball. But the Mariners, I think, still handled him pretty well considering that they were just striking out like flies. But then, and then we got to get into the bottom of the 8th inning where the Mariners nearly took the lead with a Cal Raleigh home run. But then an amazing catch was done by the Tigers. He robbed the home run, which actually got a bit of virality. And I was thinking, okay, fine. So it was a robbed home run. It happens. But the Mariners can still salvage this. It was still a 1-run lead. And then this is where we're really going to get into it. It was the disastrous 9th inning when the Mariners decided, or Scott Service decided to put in Jonathan Hernandez, which I thought made no sense. I was like, wait, don't you want to put in Jimmy Garcia or Andres Munoz? And
yeah,
we're seeing so many, and I saw it on Twitter, like there were so many excuses being made. It's like, oh yeah, but we got to save Garcia. He's all banged up. It's like, no, he hasn't pitched since Sunday. And
right.
And I still thought he got prematurely pulled. Like they pulled him in favor of the whole lefty matchup. And yet they don't know. Service is not aware that Bryce Harper kills lefties to pieces, just like Yordan Alvarez. And I've noticed that Service will even go with lefty-lefty matchups, even if the analytics are heavily against it. And yeah, you got some things to say. No, go.
Well, first off, that, getting to that point where you're down 1 in the 9th had nothing to do. I mean, that was like the icing on the cake, going with Hernandez in back-to-back games when there's no need to use a guy like Jonathan Hernandez, especially when you have Andres Munoz and Jimmy Garcia ready to go. And you're in a situation where you need to get yourself into a good position to win that game in the bottom of the 9th. The Mariners, definitely have made somewhat of a trend by having, getting them in a position to walk off. But this is what really lost this game. So first and foremost, look at when you're looking at box scores, look at the Tigers 1 through 9. Wenzel Perez, leadoff dinger. Colt Keith, double. Matt Veerling, 3 for 5 with the stolen base. Madras, 1 for 5, double. Gio Urshela, 2 for 5, double. Stolen bases out of Parker Meadows and Zach McKinstry, who went 2 for 5, 4 for 2. And then Jake Rogers, 1 for 3 with a double. The only guy who did not get a hit last night was Javier Baez. Surprise, surprise, because Baez is trash. When you look at the Mariners, okay, and we start with Victor Robles, 0 for 4 in the leadoff. Arozarena Rosarena and Cal Raleigh were the only two members of the Mariner lineup that actually seemed to have a pulse. They were 3 for 7 with a double and a home run combined. Justin Turner 1 for 3. But then you go from Polanco, Moore, Haniger, Garver, and Leo Rivas 1 for 16. So 5 through 9, the Mariners were 1 for 16. And when you're looking for reasons of reasons for why they put themselves in a position where Scott Service literally has to fuck them over at the end of the ball game, it's because they literally got no production against a Detroit Tigers team, by the way, who are very not good. I mean, they get 2 runs off of Skubal, who, Skubal's 13-4. He's like, credit Skubal's actually a very good pitcher, but it's not like it's not like they didn't have opportunities to be able to turn things around. You have a very good start from George Kirby. I know, giving up 3 runs, but he goes 7, and it's not like he put them in a position to lose. And for me, we can talk about Scott Service, and it's justified. There's no doubt that it's justified. But when you're looking for, to me, it seems so simple so simple to point to Scott Service and be like, well, he fucked it up again. Yes, but it was also the Mariner offense really put him in a position where he was, his back was against the wall, and he was forced to make a decision in order to get them to the bottom of the ninth. And it turned out that, bringing a guy like Jonathan Hernandez was the wrong move, especially as you mentioned. They have 2 of their best high leverage relievers ready to go. Jimmy Garcia hadn't pitched in 2 days. And right off the top of my head, I can't remember the last time I saw Andres Munoz. But the reality was that you had 2 of your best relievers up and ready to go, where you could have given yourself a far better opportunity to get to the bottom of the ninth in order to, try to walk it off or at least tie it to get into extras. But yeah, I mean, for me, when I look at this game, the fact that Dylan Moore, who is a fan favorite, but also has not really performed well, consistently well since the month of May. You have Leo Rivas in your lineup.
Basically free outs.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And
you were honestly, I would have rather put in Josh Rojas over Rivas, even against the lefty, because I would still rather have a struggling Rojas against the lefty rather than Leo Rivas, who basically gives you no chance of anything. Right.
And then, and again, this is Scott Service playing the matchups again. And it's like that. Don't get me wrong. Josh Rojas himself hasn't really been playing great either, but that's the thing. It's like, if you're going to lose, you want to lose with your best players on the field. And that's exactly it. I would rather had seen Dylan Moore play shortstop and having Josh Rojas over there at third base. That's, to me, it's one thing to lose. And when you lose, at least you can say that your best lineup was out on the field. And that's the thing, is we're in a dogfight for this division. And it's like, dude, I don't want to hear about saving players for the playoffs. The priority should be winning series and getting themselves in a position. And if this team fails to make the playoffs, and that's still a 50-50 proposition at this point, you can look back at some of these series and some of these games where they were easily winnable. And you look at some of these decisions that have hampered and plagued this team. And this can't be fun for that clubhouse. I mean, after getting that, shot in the arm with the deadline, bringing in a Rosarena and Justin Turner, who actually have played well above my expectations so far. And we're waiting for that winning streak. This is supposed to be the month where everything, August is the month where everything falls into place. And now, the word is that Julio Rodriguez will be back, potentially as a DH for a couple of games until that ankle is ready to go. I know that they've been testing it. There has been some pain with him as far as running goes, but allegedly he's been in the cage for the last 3 days and swinging a bat. There's been no issues as far as pain in the ankle. So, that's going to be huge too, to get Julio Rodriguez back into the fold. And putting him, mixing him in with Justin Turner and Randy Arozarena and Cal Raleigh. And I think that's me personally, I think that's going to be a huge boost to this offense. But in the meantime, I just look at yesterday's game. I look at Sunday's game. And it's like, I don't want to hear because they were facing Zach Wheeler and Tarek Skubal. You still have a job to go out there, and that's to be productive. And it always gets back to the whole, when these players step in the box, exactly what's going through their head. Because again, yesterday, issues with the fastball again.
It's fastball, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
mind numbing.
Before we get into that offensive futility, which, yes, I absolutely agree. The offense was just absolutely awful. But before we do, let's take a look at what Scott Service said on his reasoning and excuse for bringing in Jonathan Hernandez over Andres Munoz or Jimmy Garcia.
He was up early if we'd have tied it in the 8th. I think, we're in a stretch of games right now. Where we're at, how his season has gone. You want to keep him fresh, tied or up. He's in the game tonight. And those are the things, you're thinking about, earlier in the day, looking ahead, this series, the next series, kind of where we're at. You start chasing games at this time of the season, you'll look up and you're going to have leads and he's not going to be available. You can't pitch guys 3 in a row. You're not going to pitch him. Even the injuries he's had this year, you're going to be careful going 3 out of 4. So, if we'd have tied earlier, he would have been in the game.
I mean, just that comments alone. It speaks of true ignorance. It speaks of arrogance, and it's like he has no idea what he's talking about. And also, Jimmy Garcia pitching 3 in a row, that never happened. He hasn't pitched him since Sunday, so that's absolutely inaccurate. And just like you said, and how you would interpret it, he's talking about it as if they made the playoffs. Now, if this was you just clinched the playoffs and at least a division, because that's all what the Mariners can really get at this point, because they're 4 games back in the wild card. If they did that in the last day of the season, okay, fine, whatever. And that's if you've secured the playoffs. But we're now in the position where Mariners don't even have the division lead anymore. They just lost it yesterday, and now you still have Scott Service still downplaying this entire situation, which it absolutely makes no sense. And this is the kind of stuff that really should get a manager fired. He even admitted, we shouldn't just keep racking up wins because we're going to burn out our pitchers. It's what?
He's
based on things that might happen.
If you know how to deploy your bullpen accurately, you're not going to burn out your arms. Right. And I think the funny thing is, I think he realized what he ended up doing to Matt Brash last year, where he basically ran him out two out of every 3 games. And I think he's scared about that, potentially doing that to any other arm. But the reality is, and before I get into it, I'll just say that when he said that he used Garcia 3 games in a row, he did in the Philly series. But you gave him the breather 2 days ago. You gave him the breather in the first game against Detroit. So how long do you think it takes for a reliever who doesn't throw a lot of pitches to be able to, you gave him the 1 game breather. He's available and ready to go last night. I'll just say this. It does. I'll agree with you. It does have a little bit of arrogance to it. I just think that he is so. This is my problem. This was my problem with the likes of Pete Carroll and Mike Leach, where you have a core philosophy and your inability to be flexible, especially in game. You have to understand different situations. If one aspect of your team isn't necessarily performing well, you have the ability to make up for that in other areas as well too. And this dude literally has no flexibility when it comes to bullpen deployment. And then he has the wherewithal to go into a press conference and be like, "Yeah, it was right. I was right. What I did was right." And fuck everyone else who wants to disagree. These are the type of things that get managers fired. Your inability to have some type of flex and understanding where you are in a situation. Last night was the perfect example. You're down 1 going into the top of the 9th. And the idea is you can't let this game slip away. You have to have the understanding that, okay, cool. So regardless if we go into the bottom of the 9th and it's 5, 6, 7 in our lineup, or it's 8-9-1, or it's 2-3-4. Whatever the situation is, you have to get yourself to the bottom of the ninth in order to give yourself a good, a good opportunity to either tie it or win it. And that means you have two guys in your bullpen, the two highest leverage arms in your bullpen that are available and ready to go, with the understanding that we have to tie it or win it so we can actually utilize that back into that bullpen. Because what happens if they brought in Jimmy Garcia, 1-2-3 inning, and then in the bottom of the ninth, the Mariners tie it, and now you can get yourself to a situation where you have Andres Munoz. You have Munoz who can swing it to the bottom of the 10th and give yourself an opportunity to win it. See, and this is why we always go back to guys like Lou Piniella, guys like Joe Madden, who I know that you're absolutely in love with, guys like Terry Francona, guys who are winners, who understand the moment and understand exactly that we are in a sprint and every game matters. We cannot afford to drop games. We cannot afford to drop series to a team like the Detroit Tigers. Like the only thing that matters is today. And if they win it, and depending on the pitch count, because again, he used Jimmy Garcia 3 straight games against the Phillies. So you know that he can go on back-to-back days, and you gave him the day off in game 1 of that series. Right? So if you win it, then you have an opportunity to win the series. And that means, again, you can still use Jimmy Garcia and Andres Munoz if you need it in the 3rd game of the series, but you have to give yourself an opportunity to win a ball game. Even if the bottom half of your lineup went 1 for 16, you still have another opportunity in the bottom of the ninth, which means you have a responsibility to get the game to those bats. And his response was not to use Jimmy Garcia, but to use Jonathan Hernandez on back-to-back days. And oh, by the way, Jonathan Hernandez is about as, middle of the road reliever as you're going to get. You know what I mean? Like, he's not an upper echelon high leverage arm. He's more of a pivot. He's the type of guy like JT Chargois. He's a guy who's going to be the first or second arm out of the bullpen, so you can get to the Colin Snyders, the Austin Voths, the Trent Thorntons, Jimmy Garcia, Andres Munoz. Like, he's a pivot. He is not a high leverage arm, and yet, because of the way that he deployed this bullpen in the first game of the series, what do you have left? And what you had left was your 2 best relievers, and you know what I mean? Like, these are when the Mariners fail to make the playoffs this year, and again, that's a 50-50 proposition at this point. You look back at these games, and you point to the you look back to some of these blunders that Scott Service did, and it's like, dude, this is, to me, this is inexcusable. And that's the thing, is I think you and I can both agree that we should not even be here at this point. Scott Service probably should have lost his job a couple of years ago.
I mean, I'm saying that he should have lost his job after 2018, when he failed to bring the team to the playoffs with Nelson Cruz, Robinson Cano, Edwin Diaz, and Kyle Seager in their primes. And what's the best excuse that Mariner fans would give? Oh, well, it's because Houston cheated and they were just too good.
No. Because here's the thing. It's like, yes, Houston certainly did bang on trash cans, and all that's great, but it's the in-game decisions and the lack of flexibility to understand that sometimes you have to use high leverage arms in order to win ball games in situations where otherwise you wouldn't like to. Like, that was the best part about Terry Francona. Like, if you guys remember back to 2016, where he had the lefty, his Swiss Army knife, Andrew Miller. Andrew Miller was brought in to potentially be a closer, but he also recognized that there's situations like in the 6th, 7th, 8th that calls on high leverage situations in order for you to get the back end of your bullpen. And he also had faith in other guys in his bullpen in order to hold leads. So he deployed Andrew Miller. Like, if if the game was tied in the 7th and somebody got on base, he would bring in Andrew Miller to get out of the inning. and to, basically to shut the door there. Or if they were in a one-run lead, they had a one-run lead and it looked like maybe somebody walked a guy, they would bring in Andrew Miller, whether it was home in the road, he deployed him accurately. And that's, that was the thing that he didn't do with Paul Sewald that he should have taken advantage of, because there were times where the Mariners were either tied or clinging into a one-run lead. And instead of deploying your best arm in order to give yourself a better opportunity to win, he would just save them to the ninth. And it, and this is the exact same situation happening all over again. You're absolutely right. We have seen more failure in these situations. You were talking about after the 2018 season, 100%. We saw this in the playoffs in 2022.
Yordan Alvarez. Hashtag Robbie Ray versus Yordan Alvarez. And I will keep banging on that situation even more passionately than Mariner fans dwelling about 95.
And we saw it. We saw it in the Philly series, lefty on lefty again. When you don't have your better lefty. Like I know that Gabe Spires in Tacoma, but who gives a shit? It's like if he's like, I would rather take cutter slider from the left side with Gabe Spire than Taylor Saucedo. And I like Sauce, but Sauce is not a high leverage arm where you can play lefty in the later innings. He's not that guy. Like the best time to deploy a guy like Taylor Saucedo is if the Mariners are up by 3. You know what I mean? That's like when or if they're down by 3. You know what I mean? That's when you should use Taylor Saucedo. He's not a high leverage guy whatsoever. And yet here we are, Scott Service, deploying guys, like I would be okay with this if this was in April. You know what I mean? Like where you're learning certain bullpen arms. And so maybe you'll give opportunities to some of these guys in high leverage situations to see if you can trust them, see if they're capable. You know what I mean? But in a pennant race, going down the stretch where every single game matters, and it almost feels like you're gift wrapping the division to your division rival after blowing a 10-game lead in this division. You know what I mean? It's like, what do you like? To me, it just boggles my mind of the arrogance that Scott Service continues to act like, and the will for the willingness to concede games because of just bonehead decisions.
And he doubles down about it. It's not like he admits to the fault. Like for me, for example, I admit to a lot of bad takes I had. Like I said that Mitch Haniger was going to have a full, healthy, and 2021 type season because of the every 3-year rule, 2018.
By the way, I did too. I did too. And I was wrong about that. I said that he would be. I said Haniger would be healthy this year because of the way that Service deployed him. But what we saw was after the home run on opening day, he just ran him out there every single day. And it's like, I was wrong about that, but I was right. We were right about him being healthy. So at least it's like 50% of the take.
50, yeah.
But
I said that.
Here's the funny thing. It's like, there's only one other person I can think that doubles down on his bad decision or doubles down on something, but at least Donald Trump is entertaining. You know what I mean? At least he's entertaining about it. But he'll double down on something where you're like, dude, just like it's outrageous.
It's like, just stop. You don't have to, kind of thing. But he does it anyway.
Yeah. Although Trump 2024. I'll just say that at least he's entertaining about it. Scott Service is not entertaining. As a matter of fact,
really boring.
Yeah, he's just, what's funny, it's like, this is like, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but there are times where quote unquote good managers are exposed, and as things progress and as certain things play out, you kind of see them reaching or potentially doing things that are desperate. And I think that we're seeing Scott Service in desperation mode right now because things are starting to slowly fall away. I'll just say this: with no contract for 2025, you would think that he would prioritize every single game because just like Jerry DiPoto, they're fishing for contracts too. And these are not the way. This is not the way that you play in order to get extended. Like if he was prioritizing every single game and making the right decisions to put them in a position to win, you can justify it. Even in losses, you would still justify it because it's like, well, at least he made the right moves. And unfortunately, it just didn't work out the way it wouldn't work out the way. But like when every single game and every single loss, there are decisions made where you can easily second guess it. How do you justify an extension? You can't.
You can. And let's put it this way, because we have fans. I'm sure there are fans that were like, well, if Jimmy Garcia did not work out, if he gave it 3 runs, you would be bagging on Scott Service. I'd be like, my answer is actually no. I said it was the correct decision. Then you just put that on Garcia and the defense.
Yeah.
And of course the offense,
yeah, for sure,
for even putting themselves in that position. So even if Josh Rojas went 0 for 4 against Scooball, I still would have been okay with it, because at least you put one of your better players on the team, or Luke Raley.
Yeah.
Which I do believe that if the Mariners were still at 3-2, Luke Raley would have gotten into that game. And I still think that he
100%.
should have gotten the start today, because
100%.
Haniger isn't really doing that much better. And ironically, he's actually better against righties, by the way, than lefties.
Yeah. Yeah, I just look at this and AZN BZN in the chat room says Service has to go. Yeah, I'm right there with you. But I'll just say this, man. You have to be willing to gamble. And even versus lefties, you still have to put your best lineup on the field. But it gets back to, as a matter of fact, Flick of the Switch and I were talking in my on my YouTube channel, in the chat rooms in my YouTube channel. Of course, Swinging for the Fences. Go on YouTube, check it out, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. And he was wondering who I was talking about it, because on my last show, I referenced the fact that you can't be upset with Randy Arozarena and Justin Turner. They got 2 of the best hitters on the market, WRC plus wise, but they still missed the opportunity to bring in another shortstop or another third baseman, because you can't go a full month with Dylan Moore or Leo Rivas playing shortstop. You can't have that situation for a full month until JP Crawford gets back. Like, you had to have brought in another infielder. And Paul DeYoung, who went to Kansas City for a bag of balls. Ahmed Rosario, who went to LA for a can of chew. These are the type of things where you missed out on. Like, if there's anything where you can say that the Mariners swung and missed at the deadline, it was identifying another infielder that you can give regular at-bats to at least for a month. And had they brought in Paul DeYoung or Ahmed Rosario to take shortstop for a month, you get at least a 96 WRC plus. It's not league average, but it's pretty goddamn close. And it only strengthens your bench come September when JP Crawford does get back. That's the thing that they missed out on, because the Mariners don't have a guy right now in their minor league organization they can justify calling up. A lot of people were talking about Cole Young. It's like, I would think that might be a little premature, but who else do you have? Leo Rivas? You know what I mean? I know they just brought up Ryan Bliss, but how does that, is this now a situation where you're going to move Polanco to third base? Because that would, to me, that would make the most sense, because now you can deploy, you can give Josh Rojas a little bit of a mental breather, and then you can deploy him accurately versus right-handed pitching. To me, if you're going to bring up Ryan Bliss, you got to play Ryan Bliss. You can't just bring him up there to sit him on the bench 4 days a week. He's got to play. And that also adds a different wrinkle as far as speed goes. That's the thing. It's like we're kind of like in emergency mode right now with this ball club, because they cannot afford to drop winnable series. Like, I know after this series, I think next week they travel to Detroit. Of course, I'm going to be there at Comerica. But these are the type of series where it's, when I look at the complexity of the playoffs, it's either division or bust, because right now I believe the Mariners are not even in the wild card fold, losing
4 games back.
Yeah. So it has to be the division or bust. And the way that Scott Service is playing this is acting like that it's inevitable. Like, we're going to be there. It's inevitable. And it's like, dude, you are so fucking high. I'm just, it's, you're just left dumbfounded. And I just get back to it. It's like, if you're going, like, that's the thing. It's like, you have to at least fix at least one of those positions on the left side of the infield. And so if you're bringing up Ryan Bliss, then you move Polanco to third base, because at least he has the ability to do it. And then you can give Ryan Bliss every day at bats, because that's, as far as I'm concerned, of the three players, Ryan Bliss, Dylan Moore, or Leo Rivas, Ryan Bliss at least produces. Of the three, he doesn't produce at a high level, but at least he produces. And when he gets on base, he can swipe a bag.
Yeah. Like everything you're saying, like Ryan Bliss really should be playing. He's been riding the bench way too long, it's really been hurting his growth. And I can see why now it makes sense why some of these players in the farm system may have been stunted their growth, and they move on to other teams. They instantly become better. Yeah. I mean, and then I can go more, and we got to go more into this offense, because other things I'm really concerned about is I just hate their approach to the plate so much. Like now we're seeing Arozarena taking ridiculous swings. We've even saw Justin Turner even take swings, and it's like, how could anyone like those two even listen to a guy like Scott Service about how he's being coached? Like, we saw Mitch Garver take a half butt swing, which pretty much should have got him boos. And what about? And I saw, like, there were some times where they were just swinging like way outside the strike zone because they were playing desperation mode, and it's like they don't have to swing at everything. Like you saw the Tigers even having a better plate discipline. I'm not saying much, but the Mariners. Like, I don't care if it's Scooball, because even on the 5 ERA guy, they're still going to have these problems, which they did against the Tigers. Like, the guy on Monday, I actually added him on my fantasy team, because one of my strategies in fantasy baseball is add anyone who starts the Mariners. And actually, that's been my best player throughout the entire season.
Yeah, no doubt.
Like, with the exception of Trey Turner and such players, and my 3 Mariners starters that I have Bryce Miller, Logan Gilbert, and George Kirby. But aside from that, anyone starting against the Mariners have been my best starters. And the other thing that concerns me is when we saw Jared Kelenic, he's not having a good stretch right now, but at some point, he was looking a lot better than last year. Teoscar Hernandez is having an absolute all-star season. Suarez has actually been picking it up recently. And then we're seeing Ty France hit 2 home runs in 2 games in a row. Yes, it's too early and premature, because he was like 1 for 12 before that. But that just makes me wonder a lot of Mariner fans claim that, we're cursed because anyone who leaves the Mariners gets instantly better. It's like, no, it's because the coaching's just really bad. And it has nothing to do with curses. Like we all knew that Teoscar was going to take off, other than the fact he had better plate protection, but someone coaches him a lot better, just like someone may have coached him better in Toronto. So it's not a curse problem. It's a coaching and discipline problem. Like, if I'm the manager, if I had the credibility to be one, I'd be like, hey, you strike out like that, I'm having you do 20 push-ups in front of the crowd. Home or away.
It's not even that. It's like, you're going to go down to Tacoma and you're going to fix things. I'll say this, right? So it has nothing to do with the marine layer, and it has nothing to do with curses. It has everything to do with approach. And I said it on my show last week. There's a time and there's a place for information, right? So, of course, the Mariners are heavily analytically drawn. And so they have a whole bunch of information, especially what you produce in certain counts. And I always say there's a time and there's a place to give players that information before the game, after the game, but not during the game. Like, I don't want some geek in the analytic department to, ring up Scott Service mid-game and say, hey, Mitch Haniger in the 2-1 count, is slugging 666. So make sure that he's in 2-1 counts. And it's like, you don't want to give that information to a player leading up to the plate. You actually want your players not thinking about a goddamn thing when they step into the box, right? Like,
it's a heavily mental game.
When you're on deck and you're looking, when you're on deck and you're looking at a way a pitcher is working to somebody, and it's like, for instance, if there's a runner on and you notice that the defense is playing double play depth, you're going to look at that and be like, all right, cool. If I get a high fastball, maybe I'll wait on it a half a second and then put it through the hole on the right side of the infield. But the reality is, what do Teoscar Hernandez and Julio Rodriguez do incredibly well? What is their bread and butter in the batter's box? Fastball, pull side power. That's what they do. And when you hear Scott Service talking about we're willing to live with some strikeouts, that is very true, as long as the guys that do what they do well are still doing what they do well, right? So Randy Arozarena is basically a carbon copy of Julio Rodriguez when it comes to pull side power, right? So cutters in, fastballs in, middle, or even hanging breaking balls that had kind of catch the lower end of the zone. As long as they get the bat head out in front of the ball, that ball is exit stage left into the bullpens in left field. Like, that's what they do. That's what they do incredibly well. That's how they were developed. So why are you trying to saddle a Mustang mid-game? And we saw this over the course of the last 2 years. Last year with Teoscar Hernandez, how he couldn't handle the slider low and away. So essentially what you have to tell your players is, listen, it's like, listen, early in the counts, you're going to get your pitch, whether it's middle in, you're going to be able to get that pitch. So be aggressive on that pitch and don't put yourself into a situation where you're down 1-2 and then you get slider low and away. Right. So you have to maximize your best ability to get into your strong side, which is pull side power. Right. And so, I was saying this, I used to play baseball at a high level. Now, granted, it wasn't Major League Baseball, but it certainly was at a high level. And every single time that I stepped into the batter's box, it was fastball right down the middle of the plate. And ironically, looking for fastball right down the middle of the plate actually allowed me to see other pitches coming out of a pitcher's hand, because when you're looking for fastball, it's easy to recognize changeup or slider, and it allows you not to just flail at those pitches. But what Scott Service did, he overcorrected because Julio had trouble with slider low and away, because Teoscar had trouble with slider low and away, because Jared Kelenic couldn't get the bat head around on splitter low and away. He had them looking for those pitches. And in some context, it worked because they were drawing a little bit more walks and they were working counts, and all that's good. But what ended up happening was it basically killed their greatest strength, which is fastball recognition. And as we've seen all year long, what has happened with this team when it comes to recognizing and hitting fastballs? They're either late and swinging through it, or they're fouling it off, or they're just letting them go down the middle of the plate. You know what I mean? And they strike out. And it's like, dude, it's the easiest thing. Like, if you cannot hit a fastball, you cannot be at the major league level. And of course, they're not going to send Julio down. They're not going to send Arozarena down. But it's just the simple recognition of saying, okay, cool, here's what I want you to do. Fastball right down the middle, and look for that always. And then if you see it on the first pitch of a series, take a big giant swing at it. And yeah, you might fly out to left field and you might ground out to shortstop, but number one, you're making contact, but chances are you're going to be hitting the ball incredibly hard. You know what I mean? And that's actually going to lead to a lot more games. And you mentioned Ty France. What has Ty France done in Cincinnati? He got back to what his greatest strength is, which is using the entire field. And coincidentally, he's poked a few out. Jared Kelenic is a good example of, now all of a sudden he went from such a below league average player to a league average player. And I would probably assume over the course of the next couple of years, Jared Kelenic will probably take that next step, especially in Atlanta. And of course, Teoscar has been unbelievable. It's overcorrecting. It's what I like to call oversimplifying something that you didn't have to course correct. And it's literally just getting back to the basics of hitting, and allowing players to do what they've, the reason why Julio got the extension. Let him get back to that player. Let Randy Arozarena be aggressive early in counts. Let Cal Raleigh do the exact same thing, and leave it where let the chips fall where they may. And I will probably assume that, you'll probably see 8 to 12 strikeout games, but you'll also probably see the Mariners score 5 to 6 runs,
which we did see, and especially against Philadelphia. against Chicago. They even kind of somewhat scored against Boston. They actually did in their first 2 games. And then what's going on with such a bad team? And the other thing I want to point out is I am so tired of hearing Marine Layer. Like, I don't want to hear it ever again, because the fans that are talking about Marine Layer excuses, they're also the same fans that completely forgot that Nelson Cruz had his best years in T-Mobile Park. Robinson Cano had his best years in T-Mobile Park. Kyle Seager had some of his best years in T-Mobile Park, although Mariners is all he played for. Alex Rodriguez 2000 had the best wins above replacement season of his career in T-Mobile Park / Safeco Field. Edgar Martinez nearly hit 40 home runs in Safeco Field in T-Mobile Park in 2000. And what about even Brett Boone? He nearly hit 40 home runs himself. And yes, there's the whole juice thing, but everyone was juiced anyway, so it doesn't really matter that much.
Well,
pretty much cancels each other out.
But, the one thing that Edgar Martinez, Brett Boone, and some of the other guys, it has nothing to do with juice. It has everything to do with recognizing certain pitching and playing to your strengths, which is why Brett Boone was able to hit, 33 home runs in 2001, 37, which is why Edgar Martinez and A-Rod and some of these better players consistently hit at that ballpark, is because they're fucking good hitters. You know what I mean? Like, it also could come down to that we just don't have good hitters. We have guys who can hit the ball out of the ballpark, and that's certainly important, but we also don't have well-rounded hitters. You know what I mean? Like, that also could be a very, that's almost seems like that never gets talking about, right? So when you look at the Dodgers, or you look at when you look at the Red Sox, who we just played, and we looked at Philadelphia, like, all of them have something in common. They have good hitters in their lineup. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, it's important to draft and develop. There's no doubt about that, but it's also important to, instead of prioritizing slugging, you know what I mean? Because, Reflect the Sun just hit it right on the head. They prioritize hard hit rate and acquired those players versus contact on base, great eye. And it's like, this is what they want. They want the long ball. They want the guy who can have high slugging percentages and use the gaps and hit the ball over the fence. That's great. So if you're going to have 3 of those guys in your lineup, then you need 3 guys in your lineup who are also just fucking high contact rates, high OBP, high contact rates. You know what I mean? Guys who can draw a walk. Like, there was a reason why I was screaming for Luis Arias for the last 2 years to play second base, because that dude just gets on base. He doesn't hit home runs, but he hits singles, he hits doubles, he draws walks, and he gets on base.
Do you think he was given up on too early?
Who, Luis Arias?
Yes.
Well, Florida wanted him because they were in a playoff chase, and then he damn near hits 400 down in Miami. But after the Marlins got to their token playoff appearance, they're 1 in every 10 years. They decided to blow it up because they had guys who were coming to the end of their contract. So of course, then he goes to San Diego, and then what is he doing in San Diego?
Like, wait, Luis Arias? I think you're talking about someone else. Unless it is
Luis Arias, the former Minnesota Twin that got traded to the Marlins before last season, and who was traded to the Padres earlier this season. Luis Arias. ARRA. No, Luis Arias.
Arias. Okay. I was like, Urias. I was like, I got mixed up for a bit.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like one of the great things that made the Mariners so good in the 90s and also into the early 2000s was they just had a good group of guys that just got on base. Like, that was like the requirement for Lou Piniella. It was like, do you get on base? All right, cool, let's roll. Because obviously you can't score runs unless you have guys who are on base. And what is the problem with the Mariners over the course of the last couple of years? Their inability to get on base. You can't win ball games if you're not getting on base. And that should be the baseline measurement for building any type of lineup. The crazy thing is, granted, batting average to me doesn't tell the entire story, but it does tell you one thing: whether or not they're hitting. And when you have guys that are hitting 230 or less, very much lets you know that they're not necessarily getting on base a lot. And it's like, how are you going to utilize guys like a Rosarina when there's nobody on base, or Julio Rodriguez when there's nobody on base? It's like you can hit the all solo home runs to the cows come home, but what does that matter if you're losing series? It's like you need guys who can get on base, and that's Victor Robles, who may or may not be a Mariner next year, who has certainly been a very good hitter since coming to Seattle. Now all of a sudden he's hitting leadoff. Josh Rojas doesn't get on base. Dylan Moore doesn't get on base. When J.P. Crawford was healthy, didn't get on base enough. Cal Raleigh is feast or famine. At least they got Justin Turner, who does coincidentally get on base. He's 39 years old, and he's getting on base. Rosarina had a pretty good game last night too. So, they're like they've identified a couple players that are going to help them, but when you look at this lineup right now, the what's his ass, the Jason Voslers of the world. I know they sent Cade Marlowe back down to Tacoma, but I mean, it's like, this was starting to look like at the end of last year. If you remember those lineups at the end of the year, I mean, it literally was, 5 members of the Tacoma Rainiers that were getting regular playing time towards the end of next year. And people were wondering why we missed the playoffs. It's like, well,
yeah,
it's depth, man. We don't have depth, and we don't have good hitters. We don't have
yeah, I know. Like, this is where I was saying, like, they should have just closed the door on getting Yandy Diaz. It was literally the opportunity was literally right in their face, and I'm still wondering what it was. Some say that it was Toronto, said that not Toronto, Tampa Bay just wanted another good pitcher, and I was like, fine, put in Hancock or put in.
I know, and you're right. Like, if it was like they wanted good starters, right? So it's like, okay, so you make the decision, you make a tough decision, okay. If they're like, let's say they wanted 2 top prospects in Brian Wu, you do it, right? Like, I understand that Brian Wu is a fan favorite, but the problem with Brian Wu is what?
He has no longevity.
His health issues. So what you do is you bite the bullet, and you say, okay, cool. So we'll give you Brian Wu, and we'll give you 2 top prospects. But here's what we want. We want Yandy Diaz, and then your not your top pitching prospect, maybe your 3rd top pitching prospect, who is close to the big league levels. You know what I mean? Who's essentially blocked. You know what I mean? So we get a starter back who's a project, and then we'll give you Brian Wu, and then we'll give you Laz Montez and whomever. We'll give you Ty Locklear, Laz Montez, Brian Wu, and then we get Yandy Diaz and a top starting pitching prospect back, and then we can just roll with Emerson Hancock to the rest of to the end of the year.
It's not like they would have used Emerson Hancock that much.
That's exactly right. And this was, and as for as good as they were at the deadline, and the Mariners were very good at the deadline, they still failed to
get that one more bat that mattered.
And it didn't even have to me. It didn't even have to be Andy. It could have been another infielder, a shortstop infielder, somebody that will help, who's got veteran presence and who has also been to the postseason, which is why I was screaming for Ahmed Rosario, because he's been there and done that. But that being said, it's like, you're like, I kept hearing everywhere that the Mariners were able to get the 2 top best bats on the market without giving up any of their top prospects. And it's like, people were praising it. And I'm thinking to myself, like, man, they missed an opportunity, man. They missed a very big opportunity.
They still missed a big opportunity on Vlad Guerrero Jr. And they're like, well,
see that?
Houston, or I'm sorry, Toronto's not going to trade him because they're not interested. Sell it to him. Sell the idea.
Right. Hey, by the way, I love your shirt, by the way, CS Spend. Yeah, it's great, man. This coming from the Korean fellow or lady in the chat room. The Mariners got to stop. Well, I don't know. I can't read. Korean,
it's a guy, but still, it's still funny how you said it.
I apologize. My man.
I'm sure he enjoys it.
I can't read Korean, but he said the Mariners got to stop being content with average players, stop wasting money and spend it on players that can actually produce something for the Mariners offensively and defensively. 100%. They have a plan, and that plan is not necessarily effective. Reflect the Sun. Our pitching is just going to keep us in every game and still just need to get bats going, scrap a few runs together in the year-end tournament. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the Mariners organization needs to pull away from this is just business type mentality, or else we're always going to struggle to get into the playoffs every time. 100%. Yeah, I think
Reflect the Sun says what?
Reflect the Sun makes a good point. It's like our pitching is going to keep us in every game. Like, I think that was obvious. It's going to be, do we have the guys in the lineup who are willing to drop down a bunt? Do we have the guys in the lineup who understand that the guy right behind them is equally as capable as driving in a run? That was one of my biggest issues, was like, do we have a collection of guys who feel like we can only win if I do blank? You know what I mean? Like, is Arozarena the type of guy who understands that just getting on base is good enough because there's a guy right behind him?
This is what he preaches to me all the time.
Yeah. I'll say this again, and I'll say this when that's the thing. It's like, sometimes I'm certainly not telling these players to ignore Scott Service, because I think you still have to listen to your manager. But when you step into the batter's box, it's you taking swings, not Scott Service. It's you, right? So you have to do what's best for the team in that moment. And that's the thing, is if Scott Service is telling you to work counts and get into a 3-1 count or whatever, or, whatever the case may be, it's perfectly acceptable for Randy Arozarena or Julio Rodriguez to say, fuck all that noise. If I get a fastball, I'm going to drive it out of the ballpark, or I'm going to put it in the gap. Regardless,
like Guerrero Jr. would have basically given.
Yeah, regardless of whether it's the first pitch of the at bat. Regardless, it's like, if you know for a fact that you're a dead red fastball hitter and you get one right down the middle of the plate because the pitcher's trying to work ahead, put bat to ball and put it in play. Regardless of if Scott Service is telling you to work a count and get to a 2-2 count because you're slugging 660, but you're probably slugging 780. Against the fastball. So you got to do what you got to do. What does this say? So we better not see Scott Service next year, because it's seriously embarrassing when the Mariners blow a 10-game lead. Fire Scott Service. Amen. Amen.
Yeah, have to. I mean, come on. Like, a manager that's been there for 9 years and 1 playoff appearance, and let's go over all the list of excuses he gets. The Houston cheated excuse. They were, quote, rebuilding from 2019 to 2021. And even then, even with the rebuilding, they really only had 1 bad year, which was the whole the great purge of 2018 and 19. But even 2020, they nearly slipped into the playoffs. Like, they nearly literally slipped in an ice cube to the playoffs, and they didn't, but they were still in contention.
Let me ask you a question. Okay.
Go ahead.
I want you to name me all the success moments of Scott Service that led to extended runs or a playoff, versus all the times that he failed from 2016 of his first season, when for 3 years he had a top 10 offense, right? And the pitching wasn't terrible. It wasn't like it is now, but it wasn't terrible. We were in the playoff chase 2 years out of 3, and it went down to the wire. Like, my thing is, like, off the top of my head, I can't think of a stretch of games where Scott Service was on point, because even in the playoff year, he still failed. He still made boneheaded decisions that ultimately cost us a playoff series. It's like, I can't
that George Kirby decision in Game 2 against Toronto still could have gone in bad ways too.
Right. It's like, for me, Scott Service has basically kept this team from really achieving what it is capable of doing, more than he's actually helped this team punch above their weight. Because, that's, to me, that's like the indicative thing of a manager, right? Is your ability, like, if you have a team that's good but not great, but can that team punch above their weight and get themselves, like, 2021, maybe you might say that he got that team punching above their weight because they were incredibly hot in the second half of the season. Everything was going right. But even in quote unquote good years, like, were we punching above our weight? You know what I mean? Versus playing down to our opponents, which we constantly do.
Yeah, the Mariners have like the easiest schedule in all of baseball, and they're still getting swept by the Angels out of all teams. And the Angels is not acceptable because they've got nothing going on. Their best hitter is Joe Adell right now, and he is atrocious.
AAA. He's AAA fodder, man. He is the quintessential definition of AAA depth. Like, on a good team, he would be in AAA. He would not be a fourth outfielder even. Like, that's how bad it is. And of course, Mike Trout, their best hitter in the world, is out again. Like, I'll give you a good example. Like, in 2002, the U.S. men's national team, which was full of guys who were playing in Europe, but they were playing in lower levels in Europe, and they had a lot of guys who were playing in Major League Soccer. Who in that period, Major League Soccer was one of the worst leagues in the world. And they get to the World Cup, and their first game out is against Portugal. And
Prime Luis Eagle.
Yeah, and Bruce Arena, the head coach of the U.S. men's national team, went in there and said, "You guys are going to win. You're a better team." Even though on paper it was a complete mismatch. Like, the U.S. men's national team, compared to the best teams in the world, were one of the worst teams. Yeah, and he got them punching above their weight. They got, not only did they beat Portugal, but they get to the round of 16 where they face Mexico, who at that time was better, and they beat them. It's like, that is, to me, is the true definition of whether or not you're a good manager, is your understanding where your team is, and can you get the very best out of them to have them punch above their weight. Last World Cup was another good one, with Hervé Renard and the Saudi Arabian team, who very rarely qualifies for a World Cup, and their first game out of the box was against the eventual winner, Argentina, and they beat them. The only team to beat Argentina in the last World Cup, and he got them punching above their weight. And that's why I always ask this, is, like, when you ask me the question, is Scott Service a good manager? The first question I always ask is, does he have the ability to have this team punching above their weight? And he's got a good team. Like, the Mariners are not a bad team. They're a very good team, and yet time and time again, getting swept by the Angels. Losing 2 out of 3 to the Nationals earlier this year.
Losing to Miami.
And then now losing to the Detroit Tigers. And it's like, listen, man, it's understandable if you lose to the Indians or you lose to the Orioles or the Yankees. You know what I mean? Like, those teams are playoff teams. And I'm looking at you too. What's his name?
Just call him the Korean boy.
The Korean guy. I'm looking at you too. And that's the thing. It's one thing if you're competitive against playoff teams and you lose 2 out of 3 or split. Okay, fine. Or maybe you even play above your head and you win the series. But there's under no circumstances can you get swept by the Angels or lose 2 out of 3 to the Tigers or lose 2 out of 3 to Miami, Tampa Bay, the Washington Nationals. Imagine had we won those series and now all of a sudden those 10 losses turn into 10 wins. Where would this team be?
Imagine if they even won even half of those series. Yeah. The Mariners would still... I mean, look at Houston. It's not like... Now, if Kikuchi brings them up to the next level, then fine. But look at Houston. They don't have Kyle Tucker pretty much for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
And Justin Verlander's banged up. The only team that's like actually performing is like the usuals. Jose Altuve, and Yordan Alvarez. Of course, it's Yordan Alvarez. But even then, it's almost like the Astros are trying to help the Mariners, even though that there are times when, when it seems that also I've noticed that Houston knows when to lose. Like, when they lose, Mariners lose. And then when Mariners win, they win, with the exception of yesterday, I guess. But the point is, Houston's not a good team right now, unless they have a streak with Kikuchi, fine. But until then, the division's still very much open. Even after today, even if after they lose the series or even after they get swept, they still are very much in this.
Right.
But the Mariners got to be careful. Like, they got to at least win today because you do not want to go into the weekend against the Mets. And they're a good team, too. And it's also, strangely, Mariners also struggle against the Mets as well, even when they're bad.
I'll say this, man. You're absolutely right. The Houston Astros are gift wrapping this division on a platter.
They did it. They tried to do it last year, too, at the very end.
And, it's like it's right there for you. And if that means playing Julio at the DH, then do what you got to do. If that means Ryan Bliss is now your starting second baseman and Polanco's at third, you got to do what you got to do. And you can't overthink this. I don't know about you, but if I was in a situation where I was a lame duck manager with no contract for the next year, I would be putting out my best lineup every single day.
I would wonder
and keep telling them, and the messaging and the communication would be consistent day in and day out. Just do what got you to the big leagues, do what made you an all-star, and don't, like, we're not going to be talking about advanced analytics. We're not talking about any of that. It's be aggressive and do what made you an all-star. And if there's mistakes, whatever, don't even just move on. It's not that big of a deal. If there's mistakes, whatever, on to the next pitch. You know what I mean? Keep it as simple as possible and be aggressive as possible.
If only if it were so simple for Scott Service, but he seems to overcomplicate. He would be that, if he was a math teacher in school, he would overcomplicate a 1+1. Like, actually, I saw a very similar thing when I was observing a school, elementary, when I was trying to be a teacher. Yes, believe it or not, I actually tried to be a teacher. Yes, you can laugh, and everyone in the comments, please put the ha-ha-has in there.
That's
anyway,
awesome. No, that's actually pretty awesome, man. We need more teachers. Continue.
Well, not until I learned about the whole system. I was like, nope.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that either.
I remember I saw how the teacher was teaching how to do like 30 times 40. And when we were learning math, we were just asked to do exactly straightforward what to do on how to do it. It was about learning the techniques of how to do it right. But now they're teaching kids they're making them draw a box every single time, which overcomplicates it. And the rationale is, well, it's trying to get them to understand it. It's like, no, like mastering multiplication is just pure memorization.
Right.
And then the knowledge and understanding comes later.
Sure. Yeah.
That's what Scott Service is doing.
Yeah. It's funny when, math teachers used to make me, what's it called? Show my work. You know what I mean? It's like, no. There's no need to show your work. If 30 times 40 is, 1,200.
30 times 40 is 1,200. Oh my God.
1,200. Yeah, it's 1,200. It's like, that's fine because 4 times 3 is 12. Add 2 zeros. There you go.
That's all you got to do. That's showing your work right there.
Yeah, right. But that's the thing. It's like Scott Service is the type of guy where 1 + 1 = 2. Guys like, yeah, it's 2. No, it's 4. 4, yeah, because if you work yourself into a 2-1 count, you're slugging 666. So that's the thing. We want you to show your work as to a means to get to 4. And it's like, dude, seriously, 1 + 1 = 2. It's like that. Like in a 3-1 count, I might be doing this, but I'm also slugging the world against fastball. So let me just go do that. And you worry about fucking up the bullpen in the 9th inning.
Oh man, I love this guy. For Scott Service, he has to show his work and explain what is going on with this decision. It is true. Yeah.
Well, Dennis Strand brings up an interesting one. He says Jerry's telling Scott what to do. 100%. That's, like if you remember back to the days of Mike Hargrove, if you remember that, Mike Hargrove quit on an 11-game win streak. And it was because the front office kept telling him what he could and couldn't do with Ichiro Suzuki. And as a manager, you want the autonomy to be able to come to the ballpark every single day and put a team on the field. That's your job. Your job is to come to the ballpark and put a team on the field that best reflects the way that you like to manage. That is not the case in Seattle. As a matter of fact, Jerry Dipoto is very hands-on with the lineups. He's very hands-on. I would probably think that Scott Service's autonomy is, bullpen, making those decisions in game. But as far as starting goes, I kept asking for accountability. Like if there's a guy who's 0 for 24 and he's just not hitting, or there's a consistent track record, the accountability is to bench him. Like you're going to sit, you're going to fix whatever's ailing you, and you're not playing until that happens. And then
that small batting cage in the dugout.
And then that never happens. The next day, that player X is still out there, day in, day out, and struggling. And it's like, that's because Scott Service does not have the autonomy to bench anyone. Like the message with Julio earlier this season, when he was not hitting, it was to bench him a couple days and have that authority to say, listen, dude, this is unacceptable. And until you figure it out, you are not playing.
Well, to be fair, he did get benched. He did get a mental health day for a day, which he was supposed to, but they put him as a pinch runner and he gets thrown out. So that's how it works. And we shall go ahead and get into the final game, as we got to get going real soon. But before we do, I got a message from, if you want a man cave, this is the ad for you.
Are you looking to optimize your office, studio, or man cave? The Glance LED ticker may be for you. It is a customizable LED display providing real-life sports scores, stock prices, crypto, the news, and even the weather. Use my promo code RoofTopSports to get 10% off the purchase, and thank you.
Yeah, if you want that cool little ticker thing where you can track your stocks if it's crashing constantly, with the exception of today, it's kind of picking up. Go ahead and use my promo code, once again, RoofTopSports, for your 10% off. And here is that link so you can keep track of the Mariners score. And Sid Rock 777, good morning. You are just in time for us to talk about how the Mariners should approach the final game against the Tigers. And let me go to it. We've got Brian Wu today.
You're gonna have to cough up some of that sponsorship money, my friend. Look at you over here making moves on the sponsorship front. I'm messing with you. Hey, by the way, as of right now, I believe that the Tiger starter is to be determined. Yep. As of right now, I don't think that they have.
Sounds like it could be a bullpen day.
Very much so. And for the
Mariners better win on a bullpen day. If they don't win on a bullpen day, that's an embarrassment.
Brian Wu.
Brian Wu's be pitching.
By the way, I believe the Mariners' record versus bullpen days over the last 10 years, not 10 years, last 2, this year and last year, I believe they are 1-6.
What?
1-6 when the opposing is throwing a bullpen day.
Man, I want to see those kind of analytics. That's what I want to see. Like
yeah, because I know
Mariners record.
Last September, the Mariners had four bullpen days tossed against them in September of last year. Most notably, the one against the Dodgers at home, which was absolutely embarrassing. But I think they had one against the Reds, the Rays, the Dodgers, and I think at the end of the year, the Rangers threw a bullpen day at them, and they lost all 4.
So it looks like Mariners may be on the way to get swept, which would be very unfortunate. And also, don't forget the Astros are playing against a bad Texas Rangers team. So I wonder what's your approach on this game? Like, what should they do to win this game?
It's very simple. Don't overcomplicate things. You have Brian Wu on the hill, who I believe is 5-1 this year. He's only pitched in 60 innings. He is in the 99th percentile on xERA. Hitters only, his XBA is only 219 against. He's got a low average exit velocity. He's pretty good at chase. Doesn't walk, doesn't give up a lot of barrel. Doesn't got a little. So the Mariners are in an advantageous position right here with Brian Wu, and also take the training wheels off of Wu. If he's feeling good and he's in a situation where he's in the 6th inning and he's gone through the Tigers lineup twice without giving up any damage, let him go out there for the 7th. Give your bullpen a little bit of a breather before the Mets roll in. But that being said, also, you have Jimmy Garcia and Andres Munoz for a reason. Let them cook. I think offensively, You have to put your best lineup on the field. If that means Julio Rodriguez is your DH today, so be it. You got to give yourself an opportunity to win this game. And it starts with being aggressive. It starts with taking advantage early in counts and really just tattoo a Detroit pitching staff that, quite frankly, is not good. Like when you talk about the Tigers, and of course I'm out here in Michigan, offense was never really the issue for the Tigers. It was always pitching. Starting pitching was not good, and their bullpen was equally susceptible as well too. And so, okay, fine. The first 2 games are done and out of the way, and this is an opportunity to get the ship righted. And that means if you can get to the Tigers within the first 3 innings and get 4 runs on the board, that should be your plan of attack. You absolutely cannot lose this game today. This is about as a must-win as it gets, because you have to get this ball. You have to get the ball rolling, and it has to start with a win today. You get the Mets in town, which you need 2 out of 3 against the Mets. And then they go to Detroit. They got to at least sweep the Tigers in Detroit. This is go time, right? When you're talking about where the Mariners excel, it's in the month of August. We've seen it in 2021. We saw it 2022. We saw it in 2023. This is the month where everything gets rolling. And I understand there's some injuries, but that's no excuse. You got to get this thing moving in the right direction, and you have to take advantage of the schedule where they give it. With bad teams, you got the Tigers coming up. Yes, you have the Dodgers coming up as well too, but it's taking advantage of the sub 500 teams, winning those series, and then showing up and showing out against the teams that are going to be in the playoffs.
And let's let Brian Wu pitch as much as he wants, because the last time I remember when Scott Service yanked Brian Wu a bit too early was against the Astros.
Yeah.
That arguably caused Julio Rodriguez's injury. And I've been saying it, and I know a lot of people don't understand it, but I think if Brian Wu was there, or at least a righty pitcher was there, Yordan Alvarez wouldn't have hit a fly ball like that to force Julio to make like a out of his way kind of catch where he crashed into the wall. Yordan only did that because he kills lefties to pieces, and Taylor Saucedo was pitching.
Yeah, it was Taylor Saucedo. And I believe in that game, correct me if I'm wrong, they also had, I want to say that, they had 2 outs, but didn't they have Trent Thornton up warming in the bullpen?
Something like that, possibly.
Yeah, Thornton was available. And that's the thing. It's like, you're absolutely, I 100% agree with you. There's certain times for lefty, but if you have a guy who's continuously beat your brains in against your left-handed bullpen pitchers, which Yordan Alvarez has done consistently over his career, you don't go back to the lefty. Well, before we go, I got to ask you. Okay. So here is the next 3 series. Okay.
Oh boy.
We finish up with Detroit today, but then you have 3 against the Mets, 3 against Detroit, 3 in Pittsburgh, 3 in LA. How does it play?
I will crap my pants if they play 500 at this point. Like, here's what I'm seeing. I think they will find a way to inch out a victory today. They just will. I don't know how, but they're going to figure it out. They could very much lose, but I'm going to say they're going to win today. Okay. Because losing to the Tigers is embarrassing, but then there's the Angels series. But I'm going to say win just because I want to sound a little bit slightly optimistic. The Mets series, I think they're going to lose that series. I think they're going to lose that series badly. They'll be lucky to get 1 out of 3. 2 out of 3 would be considered a wild success. Tigers, I think they're going to lose that series. Especially if Skubal is back. The Pirates even, I expect them to go 1-3 because the momentum's just gone. And Mariners also strangely play terrible in Pittsburgh as well. And the Dodgers series, I'll say 2 out of 3 because somehow they somehow find a way to step up against the good teams, which is why I actually think this could be a deep playoff run team because, again, they play down to their competition. But then when you have someone like Philadelphia showing up, they'll step up to the occasion and they'll look like one of the best teams in baseball.
Yeah. By the way, Sid Rocks 777. This team has so much talent. It seems the coaching and the organization kills their mojo. 100%. 100%. Their coaching does it. Here's what I will say. I agree with you. I think they salvaged the third game, against Detroit. And I think this is going to be a 6+ run outing today. I think they break out of it with like one of those crazy 8-run games. Because that usually seems to happen, right? When they're on a losing streak, they always break out it with a crazy lopsided offensive number. I think they take 2 out of 3 against the Mets. You know, the Mets are 60-54. They're kind of still within the mix of the division. I think they're only 3 games out of the division. The Mets look like they're playing well, but it's the Mets. You know what I mean? It's like, let's not forget the fact that they're the New York Mets. And their pitching also is equally as susceptible. And I think that the Mariners
really matter that much.
well, right, that's true. But I think that the Mariners take 2 out of 3 against the Mets. I think they sweep the Tigers.
Oh,
I do. If you look at the last 3 trips to Detroit, the Mariners have actually played very well in Detroit. Last year, they took 2 out of 3 in Motown. And I think they sweep the Tigers. I think they get on a little bit of a roll. And this is where the Mariners will have, because I think they win the first and third games against the Mets. They sweep the Tigers, and they're on a 4-game winning streak. And at that point, it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of 7. They're going to go on that little bit of a run. They get to Pittsburgh, and I agree with you. It's going to be interesting to see how they play in Pittsburgh. I think they lose 2 out of 3 in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is that crazy aggressive team that the Mariners don't play well against. We saw that in Cleveland, where aggressive first pitch hitting types of team that likes to put the game in motion. The Mariners do not play well against teams that are ultra aggressive. They just don't seem to have that type of answer. And of course, Pittsburgh has a lot of good talent on that team. I think Pittsburgh takes 2 out of 3, and then it gets to the Dodgers series in LA, which is going to be a problem.
what are you gonna say?
I think they lose 2 out of 3 to the Dodgers, and I have a feeling that Shohei Ohtani and Mr. Teoscar Hernandez puts it on the Mariners in 2 of those games.
Teoscar is definitely going to be motivated for that one.
So I see a 2 out of 3, a sweep, and then they drop 2 out of 3 to Pittsburgh, 2 out of 3 to 2 out of 3 to LA, which would make it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They would go 8-5.
I would take that. I think everyone would crap their
13.
pants for that.
Yeah, I think they go 8-5 on this 13-game stretch. It just seems like, I think the Mariners get on a roll. But what I will say is, I think that it's the 2 losses in Pittsburgh are going to be close. I think it comes down to the final inning. And because Scott Service has a penchant for making the wrong bullpen decision, it comes back to bite him twice in that series. And I just think that in the 2 losses in LA, they just get bludgeoned. You know what I mean? Like, I think that Shohei Ohtani probably hits a 3-run jack. I think that Teoscar Hernandez hits a couple home runs in that series. You get to see exactly why the Dodgers are one of the best regular season teams in the game. So I think they go 8-5 in that stretch.
Let's take a look at what I said, because I just posted it on Twitter X where we're comparing each other's predictions. If I can find it. I just had it. I just posted it too. Anyways, I said 1 of 3 against the Mets.
Okay.
And I'm going to say 1 of 3 against the Tigers, 1 of 3 against the Pirates, and maybe 2 out of 3 against the Dodgers. And something may have that offset. So my prediction is they're going to go 5-12. And with that, they may be out of the division race if they even like that.
So you think this 13-game stretch is going to be the death nail in the coffin of the 2024 Seattle Mariners? That's what I
do. especially when you see Scott Service continuing to double down on his decisions, and he never learns from it. The best he could say in all these press conferences, and they're all pretty much the same thing. He basically says, "It didn't work out. Sorry." He basically just says like a very condescending apology, basically, without even apologizing. But the way he says it is like extremely condescending, and he always tries to say that he's right. And the part I really hated the most, he's like, "Well, I wish Cal Raleigh hit the ball at least a couple inches up." It's like, no, maybe you should have told your players to not swing so ridiculously, and then you wouldn't have had Cal Raleigh having to make a hit like that.
Yeah, it's funny, and you bring up a very interesting take, though. It's like, yeah, that is another trait of a good manager, is whether or not he actually learns from his mistakes. And he, like, this is the funny thing. It's like he always has this air around him like he's like a 4-time World Series winning manager. You know what I mean? Like, he's been there and done it, and this is all just a part of the process, and everything will work out because I know what it takes to win a World Series. And it's like, dude, you were an AGM scout before getting this job. You have never been a manager in the big leagues prior to this 9 years in Seattle, and you are so tone deaf and clueless as to how to manage a baseball game. Yeah, that's funny.
Don't get me wrong, though. I do think that Scott Service does have a legitimate role for the Mariners. It doesn't have to be manager. I mean, honestly, put him as the AGM or GM instead of Justin freaking Hollander, because Hollander is basically just collecting paychecks so Jerry DiPoto can have the bigger name of president, and
by the way,
can have him boss around.
That would be a very Mariner thing to do, right? Fire your manager, but then move him to a front office position. Like, that would be a very Mariner thing to do.
Which,
right?
I do think he is more of a fit for front office, because he does seem to have an eye for legitimate talent. Like, I got to give him credits. I don't hate him 100%. I hate how he manages, but I do think there's other things that he can do better. And his resume proves it. He was an AGM with the Angels. So at some point, maybe he didn't have an eye for Mike Trout at the time because he wasn't part of the organization, possibly. But he's probably had to have a part of getting Julio. He had to have a part of getting like Cal Raleigh, George Kirby, because managers also have to have a say in the draft. So I can see that he has an eye for talent.
I think that Scott Service had no part in drafting those guys. I'm sure he was asked, what do you think about this guy? As just confirmation that they were going to select him, right? So I'm sure that happened, but I would probably assume that he had zero part in the actual drafting of it. What do the kids say? What do the kids these days say? They refer to somebody like this as being mid. Scott Service is mid at best. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't even think he's an average manager either.
By the way, let me ask you a question real quick. I know we're running up against it, but okay. So let's say that Scott Service was available on the coaching market. Do any of the other 29 teams hire him as their manager?
Hell no.
I can see like maybe Florida or like Chicago. That's the thing. It's like bringing in a guy who has a calming presence in the clubhouse as you're rebuilding. Like, that was one of the big, like, I'll give it to him. That during the rebuild, having that calming influences and giving some of these young guys some confidence to go out there and play. I'll give him that. But as far as like being in a pennant chase, like being a winning manager and hitting all the right buttons to put your team in the best position to succeed and win, he's not that guy. He's not a winner.
Basically, make him a bench coach then, where he could be that little best friend in case the manager hurts that guy's feelings.
The best thing that the Mariners can do is let go of Jerry DiPoto, let go of Scott Service, let go of Justin Hollander, right, and bring in a new front office. Keep this team intact because this team's got talent. 100%.
Keep the scout and do not do anything with that scouting department either.
I'll just say it's like bring in a winning general manager who is going to look at this team, who is going to get rid of those players that really should not be here. I'm looking at you, Josh Rojas and Dom Canzone and some of these other guys. taking a look at your minor league organization, identifying the ones that you're going to keep, and then trade away the guys that are not going to have a future, and actually take this core and then add onto it and build onto it. And I guarantee you this team is in the World Series within 2 full seasons.
Yeah.
With a new, like if you told me tomorrow that we can have, what's his ass? The former Florida Marlins GM, Tigers GM,
Dave Dombrowski.
Dave Dombrowski. If they brought in Dombrowski, who is a winner, he's a hired gun, right? He's what Pat Gillick was for us back in 2000 through 2004. A guy who has won multiple championships and who knows how to build and get this team deep into the postseason. Bring in a guy like Dave Dombrowski, or the guy that I've mentioned plenty of times on this show, former Red Sox and Cubs, the curse breaker, Theo Epstein.
Yeah, he can break some kind of a curse that the Mariner fans believe that they have, but that's going to do it for. Yep.
When you've been mismanaged for damn near 50 years of your existence, it's not a curse. You just continuously. Suck. It's like the definition of insanity: doing the same things over and over again, expecting a different result. Yeah, that's not a curse. That's just.
And the one time they did try to do different results, they squandered it immediately. Like they chased Woody Woodward out of town, which I thought he was a great manager, a general manager, even though people don't want to admit it. They got rid of Lou Piniella. They got rid of Pat Gillick, basically.
Yeah, like that's the thing. It's like you bring in a dude like Pat Gillick, and then you don't allow him to spend the way that he has to.
With the exception of 2000.
Yeah.
Only because they dumped salary anyway.
Yeah, the biggest salary dump in the history of Major League Baseball in the last 50 years, allowing A-Rod to walk. That's like the biggest salary dump of the last 50 years. It's like, Jesus. Anyway.
And yet Alex Rodriguez is still picking up the pieces on Mariner fans, still giving him crap. Like, I think I remember I showed you a video where when Felix hit him, a fan screamed, "Hit him again," and break his elbow, which of course. But that's going to do it for all of us. Let's hope by the time this show is over, the Mariners have a win against the Tigers. But anyways, thanks for watching.
Yep.
Hit the subscribe button and also
hit the like button.
And do the same thing for Silver, Mr. Silver. Here's the link to that.
Yep.
Which I just provided for you guys. Hit that subscribe button.
Yep, and we have a show this afternoon today at I think it's 4:00 Eastern, 1 Pacific. So tune in as we talk about the meddling performances of one Scott Service. So yeah, we're gonna double down on that. So if you're gonna double down on something, double down on that.
Double down on that. But anyways, thank you for being here today, and thank you for the comments. And go Mariners.
Go M's.